Well, round 8 of the NBL is in the books. Another entertaining one. It certainly was. We're back with moments that mattered on your Monday to wrap it all up and look ahead to the week to come. My name is Joel Peterson. I'm filling in the very, very large shoes of Jack Heverin and just hoping I can do it some kind of justice. And my partner in crime, as always, on Moments That Matter is Derek Rucker. Hello, Ruck.
Hey, Joel, what a weekend it was, and it was great working with you yesterday. It was the first time, and you were tremendous.
You're far too kind. You're far too kind, Ruck. It was good to work with you yesterday, and it's nice to work with you again today. We're going to start on Saturday night. I think the talking point that everyone was discussing after the weekend, you were in the building for Chris Goulding's explosion in that third quarter against the Perth Wildcats. Got Melbourne United to a win. It was a phenomenal performance. Where does it rank in the things that you have seen from sort of live sporting events, let alone NBL basketball?
Well, I'm fairly reserved at live sporting events. I'm not a guy that's going to be get up and cheering and a lot of rah-rah. But after he went on that run, Joel, I just instinctively, uncontrollably was up giving him a standing ovation. After he knocked down that 6-3 ball of the third quarter, I couldn't help myself. I realized then that I was in the presence of true greatness and a historic NBL moment. And I've seen a lot of them over the past 3 or 4 decades. Andrew Gay, Shane Hill, Leonard Copeland. I've just seen these unbelievable players put their teams on their back and live or die with their performance. And what made it even more special was all of those points, Joel, were needed. All 46 of them. Perth were giving it to United in the first half, looking complete control of the basketball game until Chris said, that's enough. He took 32 shots. Love to see it. And he made 9 out of 21 threes. It was a real throwback game.
21 threes is pretty phenomenal. And you look through the list, so diving into the stats was a really interesting exercise over the last couple of days. You know, it's Shane Heal's there about 27 times in the list of people that have made 9 or more threes. You're there on a couple of occasions, Ruck. Leonard Copeland's there, Andrew Gaze is there, so many of the great names in the competition. But in the current context, we just don't see it that often. It's pretty much Bryce Cotton that can get it done. DJ Vasiljevic hit 10 a couple of years ago against the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix. That performance in the current landscape, does it make it all the more impressive?
Well, we play in the era of equal opportunity offense where anybody feels like they have the license and the authority to shoot the basketball. And I think that's good to a certain extent. But by and large, if I'm in charge of a team, I want my best shooter making plays and taking the shots. If there's a difficult or a bad shot to be taken, I want CG43 taken and making that shot because I have extreme faith in his ability right now. And Joel, he's got the track record and he's just continuing to prove, even at the age of 36, that he is lethal. He is a game winner. And I think United probably learned a lot from last year's championship series where he found himself not in the best of health. I think they have a better method this year of managing him, but also realizing we need to use this guy's talents more.
So he will be managed. It feels like every week we throw up a different MVP contender from Melbourne United because their depth is so enviable. Last week it was Jack White. He goes out injured. Goulding has that kind of performance at the weekend. We know he finished in MVP contention last year. Do you think even as they manage him throughout the year, he could finish as one of the top MVP contenders this season as well?
Probably not. I just think the composition of the team, there are too many other guys that can impact games on a nightly basis. And also, as I said, there's going to be a management issue there with Chris where you want to make sure that he's ready for the big moments like on Saturday night. And as a side note, Joel, in that game, Dellavedova and Ili had 19 assists between the two of them. Also, Shea Ili, for all of Chris's brilliance on the offensive end, Shea Ili was an absolute pit bull defensively. He was in the lanes. He was getting his hands on balls. He was taking charges. I thought that defensive performance by Ili was one of his best ever. And that's saying a lot because this guy is one of the best defenders we've ever seen.
So in terms of where they sit at the moment, they sit atop the table alone, Melbourne United. Have you got them in a separate tier to the rest of the competition? How do you view them stacking up against the rest of the NBL?
I still think Illawarra are a very balanced basketball team, but they've stumbled. And I would have to have them in that tier below Melbourne United. I'm putting Sydney in the upper tier still, Joel, despite the results not being there. And they haven't been overly impressive. But I just think with the talent and everything that we expect, they're going to be up there. And then it's like, what do you do with an Adelaide? Are New Zealand for real? I'm not sure yet, but right now, Sydney, Melbourne, Illawarra, they're all shuffling there in that top category, in my opinion.
We'll touch on all of those as we go throughout. We'll hit on the Hawks very shortly. What about Perth's weekend while we stay with this game? So, of course, the win on Thursday night against Tasmania. Again, they're up and down. Very good at home. They go on the road. It's a tough ask. They get knocked down by Melbourne United in that second half. It just feels like they're biding time without Bryce Cotton, the Wildcats. How do you see them at the moment?
They are, but all I think they need to do is be around 2 games above 500 when Bryce returns. Now, Bryce's return date is undetermined as of yet, but they've got a good run of games coming at home where they can get some momentum up. They can put some W's on the board. And look, for half of that game the other night, they were dominant. And even in the second half, they were still able to make a game of it. They had a chance to win that game if a few plays go their way. They look solid. They look good enough. There's no need to panic out there in WA. Although, knowing the makeup of that group of people, they will panic. They'll be calling for John Riley's head tomorrow morning again. But they're doing fine. Just be patient. Everything is going to work out fine for the Wildcats over the next month.
Yeah, they've got 5 and 6, and they've got Southeast Melbourne coming into their building before they get to the FIBA break. The Sunday games were interesting on paper, and certainly the late one delivered a fascinating result. Adelaide
Mm.
beat Illawarra over in Adelaide, so they stay undefeated at home in 2024. A 14-point margin in the end after they got the chocolates in Wollongong earlier in the season, the 36ers. What did you make of that performance? Two championship contenders going head-to-head.
Well, they got their duo cooking, Vasiljevic and Montrez Harrell. And those guys went for 20 plus apiece. And Trez just brings so much energy and emotion in a positive manner when he's playing well. The whole building you can feel is uplifted anytime he does anything. And let alone, don't let him get a dunk. Like you think Jesus walked in the building when he dunks down there. It's a real spiritual moment. But it was good to see DJ get himself going. He had a few down games, but clearly he is a class player, and it takes time sometimes as the construction and the dynamic of that playing group has changed since Montrez has come in. And now you also add Jarrell Martin, who still doesn't look like he's in shape, Joel, but he played 20 minutes yesterday and he was a plus 20. So it tells you what he can do in just limited minutes on the court and how valuable he is going to be down the stretch for the 36ers.
Yeah, he can space the floor at that big man position. The MVP discussion, we talk about it with Goulding, but we had Parker Jackson Cartwright as the front runner last week, and then Montrez Harrell does that, and you go, yeah, this guy is a legitimate threat to win this award because when he plays well, it seems like the 36ers go with him.
Especially at home. And the Sixers haven't lost at home, I believe, now for 12 months. And confidence is only going to increase and increase exponentially with each home win. And while we're on that game, Illawarra have failed a couple of tests, Joel. They had that one a few weeks ago where they hosted Melbourne and lost in that controversial game. And then yesterday down in Adelaide, they didn't quite get it done. I didn't think they played poorly, but they definitely weren't good.
You're a big one on having quality wins. And if you were to build a case against Illawarra, which I'm not necessarily, but they've beaten Cairns twice, Brisbane
Mm,
once.
mm.
Sydney is a good win, so we'll give them a tick for that. Tassie, when Tassie were really battling earlier in the season, and Southeast Melbourne when they were going no good. They've lost to Adelaide twice, so home and away against the 36ers. They lost to Melbourne United at home, and they lost to Perth in Perth. Have you got Does that raise any concerns for you as far as the Hawks' ability against these top-level teams?
Damn straight it does. You got to beat good teams. Those are the teams you're going to play in the finals. And psychologically, Joel, you have to put something in those teams' head to let them know we'll beat you, we'll blow you out. And the fact that they haven't been able to knock those teams over is a tell. Now look, Saturday night, guess who's coming to town? The Sydney Kings in Illawarra. That will be a big time game, and it's going to be one that could really impact how that group feels about themselves going forward and going into the FIBA break.
Absolutely. Before we leave the 36ers, if you were coming up against them, what would worry you most about them from a matchup perspective? What do they do that maybe other teams don't?
So obviously they have the bigs, and that is a lot to deal with on the glass and the rim protection and the athleticism. That is a lot to deal with. But I think I'm going after Kendric Davis. I need to disrupt his impact on the game. Yesterday, he had outstanding stats right across the board, makes plays at critical times. I think if you can disrupt him and frustrate him, it might lead him to play a little bit rush. And then all of a sudden, the offense isn't as smooth. The right guys aren't getting touches on the right locations on the floor and at the right time. So I try and really attack that point guard, Kendric Davis, because he's an outstanding player.
Yeah, 19 and 10 again yesterday for Kendric Davis. He was magnificent again. The game we were calling was at John Cain Arena. It was Southeast Melbourne and the Cairns Taipans. And Southeast Melbourne had a big win in the end. So they're creeping toward 500, the Phoenix under Josh King. A really even spread for them yesterday. Do you see some life in their campaign yet?
Big time life. And because of one reason, Joel, I checked NBL Plus this morning, the advanced metrics. Guess who's number 2 in defensive rating? Who would have thought it? The Southeast Melbourne Phoenix are number 2 in defense in the league, which means over the past 5 weeks, they're the best team in the comp because they were last. They were deplorable after 5 games. Now they're second. They've totally transformed their defensive approach. They're more balanced on the offensive end. And Joel, I think you agree with me. Josh King's a lot to deal with on the sidelines. There's a lot going on, but I like what he's doing. I like the fact that every moment matters to him. He's passionate, he's enthused, he's not afraid to let players know what's happening and how he feels about how they're getting down.
It's a really easy thing to say, and I agree with you completely. It's a really easy thing to say, oh, this new coach has come in and the team's doing things differently. They look like they play with the energy that he brings to the court. He's instilled them with an energy and a confidence at the moment, and they look like they're bringing that to the table.
And I think there's a more selfless feel about the team. And, to be a really good defensive team, you have to be looking out for your teammates. When do they need help? When can I show false help? All these types of attributes help build your team on the defensive end. And I think, starting off with Sam McKinnon and now into Josh King, they've totally transformed the way that team and that group of individuals views the defensive end.
Yeah, it's a good shout out. We can't forget Sam McKinnon's role in this as well. So Geordie Hunter has 14 and 7. Matt
Mm.
Hurt has 15 and 7 in a bit of a bounce back game. Nathan Sobey had 14, 5 and 9 and was really impressive for Southeast Melbourne. But Angus Glover had 22. He had 17 on Friday night against the Sydney Kings. At the start of the season, coming off a prolific NBL1 campaign, Angus Glover, it was what's his role going to be? Where's he going to fit? Can he find his shot? He was a little bit down in that regard, but this last week could have lit a fire under his season.
Well, I think it started in that game on a Sunday afternoon when they upset Melbourne United. And Derek Walton Jr. went down with an injury, and Glover was put into the point guard position. And it took him a while in that game to kind of get himself going. But in the end, he did a really good job in guiding that team and massaging that team to a victory. Each game, he's grown in confidence. And now you see him out there. Joel, yesterday, he thought he was the man. He thought he was the dude to lead that team. He hit big buckets and he got them off to a fantastic start. And then he started doing all other types of things, distributing the basketball. But it's his energy as a leader that I really like. I think he is comfortable in that forward role, in a leadership role. I don't think it's something that he shies away from, and I think he likes taking a lot of pressure on off of his teammates with his own play and his intangibles.
It was impressive too that he got going really early, but he didn't force his shot after that. He looked for what was there. He did the right things. And then just a small thing, but toward the end of the game, Ben Ayre comes in and hits a couple of threes.
Mm.
And guess who's off the bench, standing, yelling, cheering? Angus
Yep.
Glover.
And in this 2-game weekend, Hurt and Sobey shot poorly. They didn't score with the efficiency that they had been, well, in particular, Hurt. Sobey had shown signs of shooting the ball better from the field, but I think Sobey's just in a shooting slump right now. He was 3 of 18 over the weekend from the three-point line. However, I thought his basketball play is significantly improved. He's working on the defensive end. He had 9 assists yesterday. Hurt, I think, just had a bad weekend. We saw him clang a couple off the side of the backboard in both games. And this happens from time to time. You have a bad weekend. But it's a good sign that they were still able to split the games on the weekend. Justifiably could have won Friday night in Sydney. But signs are pointing up for Southeast Melbourne Phoenix.
Before we leave that, Friday night in Sydney, been a talking point across the weekend. We did talk about it on the broadcast yesterday. What were your thoughts? I know you were pretty strong at the time. Has time changed your thoughts on that
No,
late game situation?
no, no, no. And I'm annoyed that Andrew Gaze is trying to find an out for the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix. You got to foul. We're trying to extend the game. Drew knows better than that. I hope his dad didn't hear Drew making those ludicrous comments about not fouling and all this unsportsmanlike foul stuff. You got to play the foul game, especially on a night, Joel, where neither team was shooting the basketball well. It was a real struggle for some reason. Funny things were happening in that game. Funny things happen in our league late game. So I'm always trying to extend the contest to see if we can get lucky by chance.
My issue with it, I think, upon reflection, was if I'm a Southeast Melbourne Phoenix fan, we're not exactly replete with wins, and we haven't been over the last couple of seasons. I want every opportunity I can get to get a W. I understand the arguments around, well, it's percentage will come into it and all that kind of things. But at the time, you're 4-6 and you're about to be 4-7. Why not try and give yourself the opportunity to win? That was probably where I stood on. I thought Josh King's explanation in the aftermath was reasonable enough. Like, I get it, but if you're Melbourne United and you're 9-3, sure, no worries, move on. I think if you're really in the margins, then maybe you owe yourself the opportunity to compete for those moments.
100%. And look, New Zealand, Perth, perhaps if they can kind of get it going, Brisbane, their teams are going to be all muddled in there, maybe a Tasmania. There could be 4 or 5 teams playing for a play-in position, Joel. And, little moments like that. And see, you guys were really focused on the percentages. I was focused on still trying to win the game. So it was an interesting one, but they put it behind them and now they get a chance to move on.
So they beat the Snakes, who've now lost 7 in a row.
Ooh.
They will get Rob Edwards back, but their season is slipping away pretty quickly. What can they and Adam Ford do to arrest this?
It's ironic because I feel that Adam Ford is having a really good year as a coach, but he's had no luck with injuries, and now the suspension of Rob Edwards. And then yesterday, Groves and Armstrong, you could see they just weren't ready from a skill perspective. They couldn't catch, they couldn't finish, their feet looked clumsy, but that will come. They have a bunch of home games remaining, and they'll be tough. They just got to get through this next game. I believe they have, I can't remember who they have up there, but if they can get this game, go into the FIBA break, get 2 weeks of really good training in, and then come out of that break and run off a little streak, which we know they're capable of, then they're back in the hunt as maybe a play-in team or as a spoiler type team.
So I've got my Bible just here. They've got New Zealand before the break, then they've got Sydney at home out of it, and then they've got a double. It's a really tough double too. They go at Tassie, at Southeast Melbourne, the second game after that. But some winnable games for them.
Correct.
And we have seen when their best team is on the floor, they are more than capable.
Correct. It will be a really interesting time for the Taipans to see how quickly 40 can get them going again. But there's no need for Taipans fans to despair. That team is going to be competitive.
You mentioned Tassie, New Zealand among that mix of the play-in teams. They, of course, played on Saturday in the early game. And Tassie probably had their best weekend in a little while. They ran Perth close on Thursday night. Milton Doyle had a really good outing. And then they absolutely put a stop to the Breakers run on Saturday decisively by 19 points in the end. Were there some good signs for Scott Roth and his team?
Well, they've been consistent throughout the season on the defensive end. They've been losing games because they can't score. So, what's the formula to try and remedy that? It's to continue to play really good defense, especially at home, and then play a little bit quicker on offense, on stops, push to see if we can get guys out in transition. And hello to Craig Sword. He finally has come through and played a good basketball game. 18 points. He was he was devastating with his penetration to the hole. I think Liam Santamaria was going to lose his mind, though, with how the New Zealand Breakers were closing out to him. But Sword is strong. That's what he can do. He can set you up, get his hips by your hips. He's a good athlete. And in this league, there is no reason why he can't score double digits points every single game.
Yeah, it was great to see him getting up and going. And the 82 and the 83 points that Tassie scored felt like 102 and 103, the way their offense has been going at the moment. Scott Roth in the aftermath had some interesting comments in the press conference around, I guess, the welfare of his players and some abuse on social media. And called for some decisive action on that. I think it's a sentiment that everyone can get behind. Some of the stuff that we see flying around is absolutely unacceptable. If you're someone out there that throws that around, then you're not really a fan of the game. You're not really a fan of the sport. You can't classify yourself as that. What did you make of him going into bat for his team in that fashion in the aftermath?
And that's a position that Scott has to take, and he's to be commended for his honesty and his candor and his willingness to be transparent. And look, this is tough, right? Because the NBL is on a rapid growth curve. We understand that. The numbers came out last week. And with that growth, a byproduct is moments like this. We are all subject to more scrutiny, whether you're a commentator, a player, a coach, a referee, an administrator, or a GM. We are all under more scrutiny because there are more eyes on the game. I just give one piece of advice, and it can start with the individual. Just turn your social media privacy settings to the max. Don't get any messages from no one that you're friends with or you don't know. Turn off the comments, stop reading that. I think that is the easiest solution to buffer yourself from all the negativity and the hate. I think that's something that each of us can control, and it's probably the easiest measure to take.
Yeah, and I think the nature of that feedback, we're all presupposed to feedback, but the nature of the feedback is one thing that I think there's some people out there that they certainly need to consider how they go about that. The New Zealand side of that game against Tassie, it was a strange one. It was just that classic sort of trap game play from
Right.
New Zealand. You saw it coming last week a little bit, maybe not to the extent that it came in the end, but they just looked off almost from the get-go.
They've hit some highs over the past couple of rounds, and the Melbourne United victory was amazing. It was inevitable that there was going to be a psychological letdown. It's very hard to stay way up there over the course of this season. And with teams being able to scout so thoroughly and prepare themselves for you, and obviously Scott Roth is an elite coach, New Zealand were just due for a downer. It's nothing to panic. It was a road loss. It wasn't like it happened at home. So they just need to go back and regroup because, Joel, let's be honest, they are far ahead of schedule and where I thought they would be at this point in the season.
Yeah, they've got a tough little stretch coming up either side of the break too. They go to Cairns and then they've got Illawarra and then they've got Perth, both away. So a little bit of time on the road for New Zealand, but we know that they're made of tough stuff so far this season. We touched on the Brisbane Bullets on the Friday episode of NBL Now. If you want our thoughts on that, you can go and find that with myself and Alice Kunek. The Sydney Kings are probably the team we haven't got to yet in too much depth. All of a sudden, they've won 2 in a row. They're 7-5. It looks like Brian Goorjian's found something with this rotation, a little bit shorter, using a few less guys. Do you think what he has found is sustainable for Sydney?
They still don't look as smooth as I would have liked. It was a game that they were behind in against Southeast Melbourne for 36 and a half minutes. It was only down the stretch when Jalen Adams got himself going were the Kings able to come back and take the lead and show some spark. And now it's a matter of, can Adams keep this performance at that level? I think Gorgian has decided who he's going with as his core group of players. Although we saw Cam Oliver suddenly dip back out of the rotation, only playing 10 or 11 minutes in that victory. So we probably need to keep an eye on that this weekend down in Illawarra. But you can't play 10 guys. I think he's decided that this is the way it's got to be. Now that Galloway's out of the lineup also indefinitely, I think it's given him a real opportunity to lock in, realize who his 8 guys are, and say, this is who we're going with, this is the way it's going to be, and hope for the best.
Yeah, they're going to be a dangerous team if they can get it all figured out. And I think the break hopefully will come at the right time for Jalen Adams just to get his body right, because if he can do that, he could be absolutely anything. We finish out moments that matter every week with thumbs up, thumbs down. I'll let you. I'll snap the football to you for the first play here, Ruck.
Thumbs up, Chris Goulding. Anytime someone puts that type of performance out there, and I have him in my top 5 at the beginning of the season in my top 15 list. And it's moments like this, because not only is he a fantastic basketball player, he does all the stuff around the game that's supposed to happen, but he's a star. He's a celebrity. People come out to watch him play. And for all those haters, and this guy has more haters than any other player in the league. For all those haters that were killing him after the Wollongong game when they thought he flopped, when he actually almost dislocated his damn knee, what do you got to say now? I hope that you're man or woman enough to acknowledge greatness when you see it, because that right there was historic. It was iconic. And it's the type of performance that everybody is going to remember that they were there. That's how big in magnitude it was. So he gets my thumbs up.
Yeah, I think if anyone had Chris Goulding on their team, they would feel maybe a little bit differently about what he brings to the table. My thumbs up, Angus Glover. I thought his weekend was outstanding, and to come from where he was in the early part of the season with his shot, and now to really be stroking that thing with confidence, he adds another dimension to that Southeast Melbourne team. We didn't see him play a lot at Sydney last year, and Angus Glover. And a little bit of a shout out here to the man whose shoes I'm filling today, Jack Heverin, who he, Damon, and Pete had to navigate that power outage situation on Thursday night beautifully, and they did so with the Brisbane-Melbourne game. And then he had another great call on Saturday with that Chris Goulding. So a big weekend for Jack. He was over in Perth calling the cricket yesterday as well. So not that I'm trying to feather the nest here, slipping into these shoes in hosting this program, Ruck. But yeah, he's one of the best in the business, and we're lucky to have him on our team.
Yeah, Jack's fantastic. Just an amazing caller, so versatile. And the voice, he has truly become the voice of the NBL, and someone who, we all aspire to his level of greatness. Obviously, I partner with him, and we know in this business how important partners are and what you guys do. You included, Joel, your play-by-play work, hosting. It's a very difficult job, and one where you guys probably are not applauded enough for the performances that you give on a consistent basis.
Thumbs down, Ruck?
Thumbs down. I'm just going to go with the whole spate of injuries, poor behavior. We saw Jonah Antonio yesterday go off. And then Kenny Widgeon with a very surprising response from a referee, one that I haven't seen before. So referees, players' relationships, coaches' relationships, although I thought that was a bit better, and injuries. If we could clean all of that up, get it all a bit tighter, get healthier, this season is about to explode. So I don't know how you want to categorize that big potpourri, but that all gets my thumbs down.
It's sort of a mix of indiscretions along the journey.
Yeah.
So indiscretionary behaviour, we might go with that. Thumbs down. I struggled to come up with too much. I mean, Cairns is probably the obvious one, but they've got so many reasons for the situation that they're in at the moment. I just didn't expect New Zealand to come out so flat and clearly against a Tassie team that had planned for them. But from what we've seen of New Zealand over the last few weeks, I should say, so taking down Sydney, taking down Melbourne, taking down Adelaide, all in pretty convincing fashion, to come out and dish that up where they just couldn't get anything going against Tassie was really disappointing. The upside for the Breakers is they get an opportunity to atone for that by going to Cairns and taking off on a tough road trip. There's few harder trips in the league than New Zealand away to Cairns. It's a very different environment in a lot of ways. So interesting to see how the Breakers bounce back this week.
And they also lost Jonah Bolden early in that game with, it looks like, a calf complaint. So, they are solid up front, but they need all three of those big guys, Bolden, Gillespie, Menenga. They need all three of them at their disposal so that they can juggle from game to game. And if they lose one guy, it really puts an extra burden on the other two. And of course, Dane Pino will probably have to come in now and provide some quality minutes as well. So New Zealand got a little bit of work to do. They probably face their first real adversity this season.
Yeah, Tom Abercrombie did say on broadcast a couple of weeks ago that they've got a certain big man who might be slotting in as a nominated replacement player as well at some point during the season. So that might be one to keep an eye out for in terms of the Breakers in the next little while. And a shout out to Mitch McCarron too. Game 250 on Saturday. Great to see him back and great to see him doing good things. He's been a great servant to our competition. So very well done to Mitch McCarron. Ruck, pleasure doing business with you. Great to see you as always, and enjoy your week.
Great week, JP. I'll see you later.
Sounds good. Derek Rucker with us on Moments That Mattered. Thanks for your company. All the news you need on the NBL app and nbl.com.au throughout the week.